You're always counting. The music is always illuminated from within by a kind of constant metronomic ticking.
Time is something that has possession of Philip.
He varies the beat so that subconsciously, you know, something is happening, but you weren't quite aware of it.
That which we once thought of as familiar and stable, all of a sudden becomes more fluid.
The line between music and theater becomes seamless.
Einstein was a hero of mine from a very early age. In 1945, I was already 8 years old when he became, with the atomic bomb, probably the best-known scientist who ever walked on the planet, and he was alive. And as a boy, I would go to the public libraries in Baltimore and hear talks about relativity. I began studying mathematics at the University of Chicago. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I discovered the poetry of science. During that time, I was writing and studying music kind of on my own. There were very few recordings of modern music at that time. Can you imagine a 15-year-old boy trying to figure out what Charles Ives sounded like from a score? It never occurred to me to write an opera. Bob Wilson and I were talking about writing a music theater piece. And then I said, what about Gandhi? And he said, no. He mentioned, well, what about Hitler? And they said, no. And they said, what about Einstein? And they said, yes, I can do Einstein.
I began to make drawings and Phil began to think about music. He understands a work visually. And he said, oh, once I see what it looks like, it's much easier for me to know what to do.
Bob wanted to work on a large proscenium stage. He needed fly space and wing space. You can call Einstein anything you want to, but the only place you could really do it was in an opera house.
I think it's full of a lot of contradictions. This very formal, strict structure, and yet we had one scene that was improvised and totally free. So he's not afraid to destroy his codes or to contradict himself.
We were in Europe doing it there, and it was sold out every night, no matter where we went. A couple of people came to see the piece, Jane Herman and Gilbert Hemsley, and they said they were from the Met, and they were looking for this piece. Bob and I thought it was completely, we never thought it would happen. And we were met at the airplane by Paul Walters, a friend of both Bob and mine, and the first thing he said to us, you're sold out at the Met. And we almost fainted.
People were talking up Einstein on the beach, and I was very skeptical, because it seemed very far out, and I'd gone through a lot of fads before, and I was absolutely blown away by this evening, which may have been one of the greatest theatrical experiences of my life. And we were in the Met, which is hardly a venue, you know, for this kind of work.
We weren't doing it alone. The world we came out of, the Living Theater and Peter Brook and Grotowski, they had been working for decades. Bob and I were young enough, brazen enough in our ambitions to put it in an opera house.
Not only did it redefine everybody's notion of what an opera could be, but it also opened the doors to the notion that, oh, there's another audience.
What Bob and I didn't realize was that operas lost money. We didn't know that. When the whole thing was over, we discovered we had a huge debt. We thought we had full houses. It never occurred to us, but our agent, she knew. He said, look, the only way to sell the piece was to sell it at a loss. She said, I know this is a devastating news, but the fact is that this eventually will make your careers, and I had to do it. Well, she was right. I didn't expect to do any more operas. Hans de Roo, who was at the Netherlands Opera House, he said, well, I saw Einstein, it was a very interesting opera. How would you like to do a real opera? And I said, well, what would that be, Hans? It should be for my chorus and my orchestra and for singers trained in the tradition of opera singing. I thought it over, and I saw them about a month or two later, and they said, how would you like to do an opera about Gandhi?
I got the score and thought, what have I gotten myself into?
At the first rehearsal, the orchestra began playing, and they were grumbling and moaning and groaning. The conductor said, look, if anyone doesn't want to play this work, please leave now. And about half the orchestra got up and left, and suddenly the piece sounded much better.
When I got to see Satyagraha, I realized there was an entire new generation of people in the audience watching that opera.
There's that gorgeous kind of melody, and it's so simple, and it's so emotional, you know, and it's the same, I don't know what, 8, 12 notes or something. It really kind of opened my eyes to the possibility that everything emotional, everything opera needs to be, can just come out of a handful of notes repeated.
There's this sort of moment where it's all been in these threes, and it opens up into these fours, and the flute comes in, and doubled by an organ, and everyone around me just completely started weeping. Like little children at the Met. It was so fast. Like women were like wiping their eyes with their furs.
In a period when Popularity in classical music, or populism, was considered to be unthinkable. He was never afraid to try to connect with an audience.
He led the way for lots of composers to express their own voices and support themselves outside the strictures of academia.
We tend to think of the composer, you know, up in his room, and it's all complete, and it's all there, and it's all in his head.
He's not afraid to change, to grow his work. He's fearless about his creative voyage with a collaborator.
It's less to do with his vision than the vision that the piece requires.
The elements of opera, text, movement, image, music, are the same elements in film, identical.
It creates a totally different landscape, a whole different language. So it works, if you like another character. It doesn't sentimentalize, it complicates, it enriches, it deepens, and at its best, it enlightens. I can't imagine the movie without Philip's score, but I also think Philip's score, in many ways, made the movie.
He's got his hand on the pulse of large audiences. He's both avant-garde and highly popular and accessible, which I think is an extraordinary combination.
He's fulfilling his own idea of what he should be and what his music should be, not anyone else's.
Look at something like Einstein or Satyagraha versus Appomattox. He's gone many degrees around the circle. It's very liberating. I mean, you can sort of do it all.
These self-definitions of opera and theater and commercial and high art, they're crumbling. And what we're finding in the younger generation is an ease with which a young person can say, well, I do video game music. And at the same time, they'll say, would you like to see my new symphony?
These are dramatic and musical works that have altered our perception of what opera is in our lifetime.
He was a cab driver in New York before he became Philip Glass. Here is this great composer riding around in a taxi cab, bringing people to their destinations. Well, he's never stopped bringing people to destinations, but they're musical destinations now.